And if I told you that the man who hurt me the most was the same man who used to carry me on his shoulders and sing hymns on Sunday morning, would you believe me? Would you still look at me the same way if I said that the hands that braided my hair when I was a girl were the same hands that stole pieces of me I'll never get back? My name is Eleanor Grace Mitchell. I'm 83 years old, and I was born in a small town in rural Kentucky where people still leave their doors unlocked, and everyone knows your grandfather's name before they know yours. For decades, I've carried this weight in silence. I learned early that in places like mine, you don't talk about family shame. You bake pies, you show up to church on time, you smile at the neighbor who's been gossiping about your mother. But you don't tell the truth, not the kind that splits your bones in half. I was 9 when it started. My grandfather's name was William. Everyone called him Brother Bill at church. He had a firm handshake, thick gray hair, and a Bible that looked like it had been through a war. He was respected, feared, even, especially by my mother. My mama's name was Helen. She had me young at 16. I was born into a house that always felt too quiet and too tight, like the walls were listening. Mama didn't talk much about her own childhood, and now I understand why. We lived in the back half of my grandparents' house. Mama worked long shifts cleaning houses for people who'd pretend not to see her when she was on her knees scrubbing their floors. And I stayed home with him. It started with touches that didn't feel right, long hugs that lingered too long, accidental brushes. Then came the nights when Mama was gone, and the air in the house felt thick, like something evil had crept in while the sun went down. I didn't know how to say what was happening. I didn't have the words. I only had my small body, my pounding heart, and the shame that made me feel like it was my fault. He told me not to tell anyone, that it was our secret, that he loved me more than anyone ever would. And I believed him, because I was a child, because I didn't know any better, because I wanted someone to love me. I remember one Sunday after service, my grandfather held my hand too tightly as we walked out of church. My Sunday dress stuck to my back with sweat. I looked up at the pastor and thought, if I screamed right now, would anyone believe me? But I didn't scream. I smiled like a good girl and sat in the back seat of his old pickup truck all the way home. My mother never asked questions, not because she didn't care, because she was afraid of the answers. Years later, I learned she had gone through the same thing. The same man, the same lies, the same silence. But back then, I thought I was alone. At school, I started pulling my hair out in chunks. The teacher thought I had lice. I stopped raising my hand in class. I flinched when people touched me. I became quiet, invisible, safe. I used to look at my reflection and wonder if anyone could see the difference, if they could see what was wrong with me, what had been done to me. But no one ever said anything, because in small towns, secrets are part of the furniture. You sit on them. You walk around them. You never speak their name. I grew up thinking silence was love, that obedience was survival, that God saw everything and did nothing because maybe I deserved it, because maybe I was dirty, ruined. It wasn't until I was 79 years old that I opened my mouth and said the words out loud for the first time. I told a librarian, a woman named Miss Catherine at the senior center. She had gray curls and kind eyes. I don't know why I chose her. Maybe because she looked like someone who'd listen without blinking. She brought me a notebook and said, "Write it down, Eleanor, all of it." And so I did. Every word, every memory, every crack in my soul. That notebook became my life raft. It became this story, the one you're hearing now. And if you're still here, listening to the broken voice of an old woman, thank you. You're already doing more than anyone ever did for me back then. I remember the creak of the floorboards more than I remember the sound of my own voice as a child. That old house, with its chipped paint and rusting roof, held more secrets than furniture. Every corner had something buried. Every hallway echoed with words that were never spoken. After that first time, after my grandfather William made me promise to keep our little secret, I began to split into two people: the girl who smiled and did her chores, and the one who laid in bed at night, trembling with her fists clenched under the covers, praying that she'd disappear before morning. I was good at pretending. Too good. At the dinner table, I passed the mashed potatoes with a polite smile while his hand brushed my knee beneath the tablecloth. In church, I sat with folded hands while he recited verses about purity and sin. At school, I got gold stars for being quiet and obedient. But inside, something was dying. Something was rotting. My mama, Helen, started noticing little things. I flinched when she brushed my hair. I stopped asking to sleep in her bed during storms. I'd stand in the doorway of her room, wanting to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. And even when she looked me in the eye with that tired, knowing gaze, she said nothing. She didn't have to, because silence in our family was inherited, passed down like a recipe no one liked, but everyone followed. Years later, I would understand that her silence wasn't just ignorance, it was survival. She had her own stories, her own scars, her own grandfather who taught her to smile through pain. Maybe that's why she married so young. Maybe that's why she never talked about her own mother. I used to think the worst part of what happened to me was the physical pain, the confusion, the fear. But now I know it was the loneliness, the absolute suffocating solitude of being a child with a truth too heavy to hold and no one willing to carry it with you. Sometimes I go outside and sit under the willow tree by the creek behind our house. I talk to the wind, whisper things I didn't dare say to a soul. Please don't let him come tonight. Please make me invisible. Please let someone see me. But no one ever did, except my grandmother. Her name was Georgia. She wasn't affectionate, not in the way some grandmothers are. But she watched. She noticed. And one day, as I was doing the dishes, she said, "You don't have to keep it all inside, you know." I froze. My hands soaked in dishwater, a plate slipping from my grip. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice too high, too quick. She dried her hands on her apron and looked at me long and hard. "I just mean, the body remembers, even when the mouth doesn't speak." Then she walked away and never brought it up again. But I never forgot that moment. It was the first time I realized that maybe I wasn't crazy, that maybe someone else saw the monster too. When I turned 12, things shifted. I began to grow into my body, and with that came new fears. William started locking the door. He became more aggressive, more manipulative. He'd cry afterwards sometimes, beg me not to hate him, tell me I was his angel. He started giving me small gifts, ribbons, candy, a cheap locket, trinkets to buy my silence, to make me feel special, to confuse the hell out of me. And it worked, because I wanted to believe that somewhere deep down he really loved me, that I wasn't just a body, that I mattered. I hated myself for that. The guilt clung to me like smoke. Every time I smiled at someone in town, I felt like a fraud. Every time I sat in church, I felt like God was staring right through me. Every time I heard someone say, "Such a good man, Brother Bill," I wanted to scream until my throat bled. But I didn't. I stayed quiet because I was afraid of being blamed, afraid of being labeled dirty, afraid that no one would believe a girl like me over a man like him. In 8th grade, we had a guest preacher come to town, a young man from Tennessee with a booming voice and kind eyes. He gave a sermon on healing from shame, and for the first time, I felt something stir inside me. A tiny crack in the armor. After service, I stayed behind and asked him, trembling, "Can God still love you if you did something really bad, even if it wasn't your fault?" He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "There's nothing you could ever go through that would make God stop loving you." I burst into tears right there. He didn't ask questions. He just prayed with me. And for a moment, I felt clean. Just for a moment. But then I went back home. Back to the house where my monster lived. Back to the silence. That night I wrote in my diary, "I think I'm going crazy. I want to tell, but I can't." He said no one would believe me. What if he's right? I kept that diary hidden in the lining of my mattress for years. I still have it. Pages yellowed. Ink faded, but every word still alive, like a ghost whispering from the past. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had told someone then, if I'd screamed, if I'd run. But I didn't, because I was a Mitchell. And Mitchells don't air dirty laundry. Mitchells endure until they can't anymore. If you're still here, leave a comment that says, "No more silence," to show the world you believe stories like mine matter. Like this video so it can reach someone hiding behind the same silence I once knew. And subscribe to the channel to be part of this journey, to give voice to what was buried and light to what was dark for far too long. Because silence doesn't protect us. Truth does. Pain has a way of becoming a rhythm, a routine, something your body expects, like morning light through the window or the ticking of an old clock in the hallway. By the time I was 13, I had mastered the art of pretending I was okay. I could walk through the grocery store with William, smiling politely at the cashier, while my insides twisted with the memory of the night before. I could say, "I'm fine," so convincingly that even my reflection believed me. But I wasn't fine. I was disappearing. There's a particular moment I remember with terrifying clarity. I had just gotten my first period. I told Mama, and she gave me a box of pads and a long, awkward hug. No celebration, no warning, just, "You're a woman now," and a look in her eyes I couldn't quite read. I didn't want to be a woman. I didn't want him to see me differently, but he did. William changed after that. He grew more controlling, more invasive. He began entering my room without knocking, checking on me. His touches became rougher, his breath heavier, his words more twisted, sweet poison dressed in spiritual phrases. He started calling me his gift. He said God had sent me to heal his loneliness. He said no one would understand our bond because it was too holy for this world. It makes me sick just writing those words. But when you're a child raised to believe that men of God can do no wrong, you start to doubt your own sanity before you doubt them. You question yourself. Am I the one who's evil? Is this how love is supposed to feel? I remember lying awake at night, listening to the creaks of the house, praying he wouldn't come. I'd place a chair under the doorknob, even though it didn't stop him. I'd read the same psalm over and over again, whispering, "Deliver me, O Lord." Sometimes I'd even imagine getting sick, really sick, like cancer or a coma, anything that would make him stop, anything that would make me invisible again. One day, in the middle of a warm spring afternoon, I was folding laundry in the kitchen when my grandmother Georgia walked in. She looked tired, older than usual. She sat down, lit a cigarette, something she rarely did indoors, and said quietly, "I know what he's doing." I froze. She didn't look at me, just stared at the smoke curling toward the ceiling. "He did the same thing to your mother." That was the first time anyone ever said it out loud. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. My knees buckled, and I dropped the towel I'd been folding. She didn't move. She just kept smoking. "Why didn't you stop it?" I asked. Her voice was low and bitter. Because I didn't know how, and by the time I figured it out, it was too late. I wanted to scream, to shake her, but I didn't, because deep down I understood. That day changed something in me, not the fear, not the pain, but the silence. It cracked. I started writing again, not just in my diary, but in letters I never sent, to God, to my future self, to a version of me that would one day be free. I wrote what I couldn't say. I wrote until my hands cramped and the ink bled through the pages. It was the only thing that kept me alive. School became my only safe place. Not because it was joyful, because it was neutral. No one touched me there. No one whispered twisted verses into my ear. I started staying late, volunteering to clean the blackboards just to delay going home. One afternoon, my English teacher, Mrs. Aldridge, handed back an essay I'd written. She placed her hand on my shoulder and said, "You have a gift. Your words have weight." I almost cried. That night, I stayed up writing a poem about drowning in a bathtub while no one notices. I never showed it to anyone. I still have it. Writing was my rebellion, my resistance, my lifeline. But William noticed the shift. He started threatening me more often. "You'd ruin this family. No one will believe you. You'll end up in a home for crazy girls." His words were blades. His face, a mask of rage and fear. I saw the cracks in him then. He wasn't God. He was a coward, a broken man hiding behind a suit and a Bible. But I was still scared, because children, no matter how wise, are still children. The worst night came 2 weeks after my 14th birthday. I had just come home from church youth group. I'd felt hopeful for the first time in a long time. We had sung, "It is well with my soul," and for a brief moment, I believed it. But when I walked in, the house was quiet. Too quiet. He was waiting in my room. What happened that night, I won't write it here. Not because I'm afraid, but because some memories don't need to be shared to be believed. What I will tell you is this. I left a piece of myself on that floor, and I've never fully gotten it back. The next morning, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the girl staring back. Her eyes were hollow, her mouth a tight, straight line, her soul fractured. That was the day I decided I would survive. Not for anyone else. For me, even if it took decades. Even if I had to carry this secret until my hair turned white. I would survive. Some secrets don't stay buried. They grow inside you. They stretch and ache and twist until one day you wake up and realize this isn't just a memory anymore. It's a body, a beating heart, a life you didn't ask for. I was 15 when I realized I was pregnant. I hadn't missed enough cycles to be sure. I didn't even fully understand what pregnancy felt like. Sex education wasn't something we got in our little church-run school, and no one in my family ever talked about those things. But my body knew, and soon, so did my reflection. I remember staring at myself in the mirror one morning, my hands shaking as I pulled my nightgown tight across my belly. I was still small, still flat, but something was different. Something had changed. And then the sickness began. First it was mornings, then afternoons, then all day long. I threw up behind the shed, in the school bathroom, in the woods behind the church. I chewed mint leaves to mask the smell. I stopped eating at dinner, so no one would notice how quickly I'd run to the bathroom afterward. But Georgia noticed. She always did. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, she came into my room and sat on the edge of my mattress. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. "I need to ask you something," she finally said. I nodded. "Is it him?" My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. I couldn't cry. I just sat there, frozen, a hollowed-out version of myself. She sighed and reached for my hand. "I'm going to take you to see someone." The next day, we drove 2 hours to a small clinic on the edge of town. The kind of place with peeling paint and linoleum floors that echoed when you walked. A woman in a pale blue uniform led me into a room. Cold, sterile, quiet. I lay back on the exam table. The lights overhead were blinding. The nurse didn't say much, just pressed and poked and scribbled notes. Then she looked at me. You're about 10 weeks along. I stared at her, numb. I can't be. She looked at me again. Longer this time. Is the father someone you trust? That question broke something in me. I shook my head, and for the first time in years, I spoke the truth. It's my grandfather. The nurse's eyes didn't widen. She didn't gasp. She just nodded slowly and said, "You're not the first girl to say that." Those words crushed me, not because they were cruel, because they were true. How many other girls had sat in that same chair, whispered the same confession, and walked back into the same silence? The doctor came in and confirmed what the nurse had already told me. He asked me if I wanted to tell my parents. I said no. He asked if I felt safe at home. I said no. But when he asked if I wanted to report it, I froze. What good would it do? William was respected, feared, loved by the church. I was just a girl, a strange, quiet girl with a reputation for keeping to herself. So I said no, and we went home. Georgia didn't speak during the entire drive. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. When we pulled into the driveway, she turned to me. "I'll handle it." But she didn't. Weeks passed. My belly began to change. The whispers started at school. The looks, the subtle shifts in how people treated me. No one asked directly, but everyone knew. And William, he avoided me. He stopped speaking to me altogether. Stopped coming into my room. Stopped meeting my eyes. I thought that would make me feel safe. But instead, it made me feel invisible. Mama eventually found out. She came home early one day and found me crying on the bathroom floor. I was holding my stomach like it could come apart at any moment. She knelt beside me, her face pale, her mouth trembling. "Who is it?" she whispered. I didn't answer. She asked again. "Please tell me." And I broke. "I think you already know." She closed her eyes and leaned her forehead against mine. I expected her to scream, to cry, to storm into the next room and tear him apart. But she didn't. She stood up, wiped her eyes, and said, "We'll get through this. Together." But that wasn't true, because we didn't get through it. Not really. The baby came early. A girl. I named her Hope. She was born on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. No one from the family was there except Georgia. The doctor didn't ask many questions. The nurses were kind, but distant. I held her in my arms and felt something crack open inside me. A love so big it frightened me. A fear so deep it shook me. I knew I couldn't keep her. Not there. Not in that house. Not with him. So Georgia made some calls. Arranged for a family friend, a woman named Etta, to take her. Someone who lived 3 towns over. Someone who wouldn't ask questions. I said goodbye to my daughter on a Thursday. I pressed my lips to her forehead and whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And then she was gone. A part of me died that day. Not just because I lost a child, but because I gave her away to save her. And no one even knew why. If you made it here, comment. Her name was Hope, to honor the silence so many girls have carried. Like this video, so more people can hear stories like this and maybe recognize them in their own families. After Hope was taken away, I stopped speaking for almost a month. Not in the poetic sense. Literally, my vocal cords worked just fine. But something in me collapsed, as if the part of me that could form words had been hollowed out. People spoke at me, not to me. I responded with shrugs, nods, stares. I existed, but only barely. The house grew even quieter than before. William avoided everyone, locking himself in the shed behind the barn. Mama pretended to be busy, canning, folding, reading the Bible like it could scrub her clean from the inside out. Georgia smoked more. And me, I wandered. I'd walk the back roads for hours, past the cotton fields, through the woods, to the old cemetery behind the abandoned church. It was peaceful there. The dead didn't expect answers. They didn't look at you with eyes full of questions you couldn't bear to answer. One afternoon, I sat beside a grave with no name, just the word infant and a date from 1912. I wondered if that baby had a mother like me, one who whispered apologies into her child's hair, one who prayed for strength and got silence instead. I picked a wild flower, placed it on the stone, and whispered, "I'm sorry you were forgotten." Me too. Back at home, everything moved in slow motion. Mama cooked, but no one really ate. The meals were just noise to fill the air. George's hands trembled when she poured coffee. And William, he aged 10 years in a month. His back hunched. His steps faltered. He started muttering to himself, quoting scripture in a voice too soft to hear. One night, I heard him crying through the wall. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for him. But another part, the deeper part, wanted him to drown in his guilt. I started writing again, not in my old diary. That felt too small. I filled entire notebooks now, pages and pages of thoughts, prayers, screams, and ink. I wrote to hope, to the girl I used to be, to the God I wasn't sure believed in me anymore. Dear Lord, I wrote once, if you're still there, I need to know why you let this happen. But heaven stayed quiet. Church became unbearable. The songs tasted like ash. The sermons like lies. I'd sit in the back pew, staring at the pulpit, wondering how many other girls were sitting in these pews with secrets between their ribs. One Sunday, Pastor Elijah gave a sermon on forgiveness. He said, God forgives everything if we confess our sins. And I felt my chest clench. Because what happens when the sin isn't yours? What happens when the wound isn't a punishment, but a crime? After service, I lingered by the old oak tree outside, watching the families laugh and gossip. The women in pastel dresses, the children with sticky fingers, the men shaking hands like they'd built the world. And then I saw her, Mrs. Etta, the woman who had taken hope. She hadn't seen me. She was standing near her car, bouncing a baby girl on her hip. My girl. I stepped behind the tree. My body trembled. My legs ached to run toward her, to say her name, to hold her one more time. But I didn't, because I knew that if I did, I'd break again. And this time, there might be no putting the pieces back together. I watched from a distance. Hope looked healthy, happy. She had soft curls and round cheeks and eyes that glowed when Etta kissed her forehead. She was safe. That's all that mattered. Later that night, I wrote in my journal, she doesn't know me, but I love her more than breath itself. Maybe one day she'll read these words and understand that her mother wasn't weak, just wounded. And sometimes wounds take time to close. That week, Mama tried to talk to me. She knocked gently on my door one evening, holding 2 cups of hot tea. I thought we could talk, she said. I hesitated, then nodded. She sat on the bed beside me and handed me the cup. Her hands were steady, her voice small. I should have protected you. I looked at her, my voice still gone. I knew something wasn't right. She whispered. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was overthinking. But I wasn't, and I'll never forgive myself. A tear slid down her cheek. I was afraid, Ellie, afraid of what it would mean if I admitted it. I reached out and touched her hand. I wanted to say, it's okay, but it wasn't. So I just let the silence be enough. That moment didn't fix us. It didn't erase the years of pain, but it opened a door, a crack. And sometimes that's all you need to let the light in. In school, things got harder. Rumors spread like fire. Some said I'd been with a married man. Others whispered about the baby. No one said it to my face, but I could feel it in the way they looked at me. Like I was ruined, dirty, but I held my head high because I wasn't broken. I was surviving. And one day, I'd use my story to make sure no other girl felt that kind of silence again. If you made it to the end of this chapter, comment, "She survived in silence," to show you're walking alongside girls who carry invisible wounds. Like this video if you believe their stories deserve to be heard. Subscribe to this channel to help amplify voices that were buried for too long. Because silence is a prison, and truth is the only key. Some battles begin in silence. Mine started with a single word. No. I was 16, the first time I said it out loud. Not whispered, not mumbled, not written in a journal I'd hide beneath the floorboard. I said it clear and sharp, like a blade I'd finally learned how to hold. It happened on a night like any other. The house was quiet. Mama was working the night shift at the diner. Georgia had gone to bed early, nursing one of her headaches. I was alone in the kitchen, washing dishes, humming a hymn that used to comfort me before the words lost their meaning. Then I heard his footsteps. William. They were slow, deliberate. The floorboards creaked beneath his boots. I didn't turn around. My hands stayed in the soapy water, heart pounding like a drum inside my ribs. He stood behind me, close enough that I could smell the bitter mix of aftershave and bourbon. He hadn't spoken to me in weeks, maybe months, but something in his silence that night felt different. Hungrier, desperate. He reached for my shoulder. I flinched. "Eleanor," he said, his voice low. "I just want to talk." I didn't respond. "I miss when you used to sit with me after church. Remember that? You'd braid George's hair, and we'd read the good book together." I still didn't speak. He stepped closer. "I know things got complicated, but I never stopped loving you. You're special, chosen. God made you for a purpose." That's when I turned around and said it. No, one word. It echoed in the room like thunder. He blinked, surprised. "What?" "No," I repeated. "You don't get to touch me. You don't get to talk to me like that. Not anymore." His face twisted, a blend of shock and rage. "You don't understand what you're saying." "I understand perfectly. I'm your grandfather. I've raised you. You broke me." His hand moved fast, faster than I thought he could. It connected with my cheek, sharp and loud. My head jerked to the side, but I didn't cry. I didn't fall. I stood there, eyes burning, and repeated, "No." He raised his hand again, but this time, Georgia appeared in the doorway. "I'd think real hard about what you do next, William," she said, her voice like gravel. He froze. "She's lying, Georgia. You know she's confused. I'm old, not blind." He looked between us. A man losing control. A man finally realizing he wasn't God. He turned and stormed out. That night, Georgia packed a bag for me. "I don't trust him anymore," she said. "You need to be somewhere safe." She took me to a women's shelter 2 counties over. A small house with a blue porch and volunteers who spoke softly and didn't ask too many questions. For the first time in my life, I had my own room, a bed with clean sheets, a door that locked, and silence that didn't feel like a threat. I stayed there for weeks. I met other girls, women with bruises, broken voices, stories that sounded eerily like mine. We cried together, laughed a little, shared tea and secrets. It wasn't perfect, but it was healing. One of the counselors, Miss Angela, gave me a notebook. "Write your story," she said. even if no one ever reads it. I did, page after page. I wrote about hope, about the night I gave her away, about William and the way he twisted scripture into chains, about Mama and her silence, about Georgia and her tired strength. It poured out of me, and something strange happened. With every word, I felt lighter, not healed, but no longer hollow. Miss Angela read a few pages. "You have a gift, Eleanor," she said. "Your voice matters." I hadn't believed that in years. One morning, I woke up to a letter from Mama. It had no return address, just shaky handwriting on lined paper. "My sweet girl," it began. "I'm sorry. I let fear rule me. I should have protected you. I don't expect your forgiveness. But I'll be here always if you need me." I cried for hours after reading it, not because it fixed everything, because it was the first time she acknowledged the truth. After 2 months, I moved in with a foster family connected to the shelter. The Thompsons, kind people, quiet, no questions about God or my past, just gentle conversations, warm meals, and space. Mrs. Thompson taught me how to drive. Mr. Thompson helped me apply for school. They didn't try to replace anyone. They just offered a new beginning. At night, I still wrote. More than ever. My journals filled a drawer. I started thinking about publishing, about using my voice to reach others like me, because I knew now there were thousands, maybe millions, girls like me, silenced, ashamed, surviving, and they deserve to know that saying no could be the first step toward freedom. Not all letters are meant to be mailed. Some are written just to survive. I wrote mine the summer I turned 17. It wasn't a birthday anyone celebrated. No cake, no candles, no visitors. I sat in the small room Mr. and Mrs. Thompson gave me. The window cracked open just enough to let the breeze in, and I stared at a blank sheet of paper for over an hour. And then I began. "Dear Hope," I wrote. I had no idea where she was, if she was walking yet, if she liked music, if she had George's crooked smile, or my habit of twisting my fingers when I was nervous. But I needed her to know. I told her everything. Not about William, not with names. She was still a child, but I described the darkness, the fear, the loneliness, and then I told her the truth that mattered most. You were never a mistake. You were a miracle. I folded the letter and placed it in an envelope, wrote to be delivered one day across the front, and tucked it in my journal. It's still there to this day. Some part of me always hoped the right moment would come, that somehow she'd knock on my door one afternoon, or I'd see her across a cafe, or I'd get a call. But life doesn't work like that. And some letters aren't meant to be delivered. They're meant to remind you that you once had something worth writing about. That summer, I also started therapy. Miss Angela connected me with a counselor named Dr. Beatrice Hall. She was in her 60s, wore oversized glasses, and kept bowls of candy on her desk. The first time I met her, she asked, "What's something no one knows about you?" I said, "I dream about a little girl I gave away." And she didn't flinch. That's when I knew she was the right person to help me unpack the parts of myself I'd kept hidden. We talked for months about grief, shame, anger. She said something once that stuck with me. Trauma doesn't make you unlovable. It makes you human. I carried that sentence like a charm in my pocket. When the days got heavy, when the shame crept in like fog, I whispered it to myself like a prayer. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson encouraged me to apply to college. I laughed at first. Who would want a girl like me? But they insisted, helped me with essays, paid for application fees. And when the acceptance letter came from a small community college just one town over, I sat on the porch and cried for a full 10 minutes. Not because I didn't believe it, because for the first time, I did. I was rebuilding, one piece at a time. I majored in psychology. I wanted to understand the damage. Not just mine, but the kind others carried. The invisible wounds. The inherited silence. The generational pain. I worked part-time at a bookstore, volunteered on weekends at a center for survivors of abuse. The girls there reminded me of me, haunted eyes, soft voices, a need to be heard. And I listened. I sat with them, not as a therapist, but as someone who had walked through fire barefoot and lived to tell the story. One night, after a support group session, a girl named Rachel approached me. She was only 13. "Did you really give your baby away?" she asked. I nodded. She stared at me, then said, "I think my uncle is doing something bad to me. But if I tell, I'll be alone." I knelt in front of her and took her hand. "You won't be alone, I promised." And I made sure she wasn't. We got her help, removed her from the home, connected her with people who could protect her. And afterward, I sat alone in the parking lot and wept because I realized something. Maybe the reason I survived wasn't just for me. Maybe it was to make sure someone else did too. That fall, I spoke publicly for the first time. A small conference for survivors, maybe 20 people in the room. My voice trembled. My hands shook, but I stood there, looked at every face, and told my story. When I finished, no one clapped. They stood and cried because they saw themselves in me. If you're still with me, comment, "Her story is my story," to remind every survivor that they are not alone. Like this video if you believe in breaking the silence, one truth at a time. Subscribe to this channel to help us build a community where healing begins with a voice. Because letters unsent still matter, and stories untold still save lives. Some people learn to say, "I love you." I had to learn how to say, "I deserve to be here." It's hard to explain what it feels like to walk through life with your shoulders permanently hunched, like you're apologizing for taking up space. That was me. For years. I apologized for everything. For speaking. For breathing. For being in the room. Even in college, even while volunteering, even after telling my story on a stage, I still waited for someone to say, "You don't belong." And when no one did, I said it to myself. I didn't realize how loud my internal voice had become until Dr. Hall asked me during one session, "Eleanor, whose voice is it that tells you you're unworthy?" I paused. At first, I thought of William. His voice, booming, twisted with scripture, coded in control. Then, Mama's silence, George's exhaustion, the whispers in church, the girls at school who turned their backs, the eyes that looked through me, not at me. But then I realized something else. The loudest voice was mine, because somewhere along the line, I picked up the baton and started running the race of shame all by myself. Dr. Hall handed me a sticky note. "Write one sentence. Just one. That's true, and that you want to believe." I wrote, "I am not what happened to me." I stared at it for a long time. Then she said, "Now tape that to your bathroom mirror. And every day, say it out loud." I rolled my eyes. "Out loud? Really?" "Especially out loud," she insisted, "because the shame you carry lives in silence." So I did it. Every morning, I stared at my reflection and said those 7 words. Some days, I didn't believe them. Other days, I said them with clenched teeth. But slowly, something shifted. I stopped apologizing when someone bumped into me. I stopped shrinking when I entered a room. I started asking questions in class, sharing ideas, laughing without covering my mouth. And the world didn't end. That fall, I got a part-time job at the campus writing center, helping students with essays, stories, poetry. One afternoon, a girl came in, nervous, hands trembling. She was writing about her mother's overdose. I guided her through the structure, helped her find her voice. She said, "You're the first person who's ever told me this story matters." And I smiled because I remembered the first time someone said that to me. Around that time, I also began reconnecting with Mama. Letters at first, careful, hesitant, then phone calls. Stilted but honest. She apologized more than once. I could hear the years in her voice, the regret, the sorrow, the weight of what she couldn't undo. "I was scared," she told me, "and I failed you. I know that. I know," I said, "but I still needed you to try." She cried. I cried. It didn't erase the past, but it built a bridge over the broken pieces. One day, I asked about Hope. "Do you ever think about her?" I whispered. She was quiet. Then she said, "Every day. Me too." I never tried to track Hope down. Not because I didn't want to, because I didn't want to disturb her life. If she was safe, if she was loved, that was enough. But on her 7th birthday, I lit a candle and sat in silence for an hour, just thinking, remembering her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, the way she looked at me like I was her whole world. I whispered, "I'm still your mother, no matter where you are." I started journaling again, not just for myself, but for others. I created an online blog, anonymous at first, shared bits of my story, poems, reflections, encouragement. To my surprise, people started reading, commenting, sharing. Women wrote things like, "I thought I was the only one. I never told anyone, but thank you for saying what I couldn't." And something in me healed a little more every time. I wasn't alone, and neither were they. One night, while walking home from class, I passed a woman on the sidewalk who looked at me and smiled. A small thing, ordinary, but I froze, because for the first time, I didn't wonder if she saw my scars. I wondered if she saw my strength, and I realized I had stopped apologizing for being here, for surviving, for telling the truth, because this world tried to bury me, but I grew anyway. I used to believe that healing would feel like fireworks, loud, obvious, bright. But the day I finally believed I was enough, it didn't arrive with applause or angels. It came quietly, like the sun rising through fog, soft and patient. It was a Tuesday, ordinary in every way. I woke up, made coffee, fed the cat Mrs. Thompson had rescued, and I'd adopted. I had work at the campus library that morning and therapy in the afternoon, just like always. But something felt different, lighter. I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. For the first time in my life, I didn't wince. I didn't look away. I didn't search for scars or shame. I looked, and I saw a woman, not a victim, not a broken thing, not a project to fix, just a woman, alive, present, enough. I stood there for a while, holding my own gaze. Then I whispered, "I'm proud of you." It was strange, talking to myself like that. But I meant it, and I think I needed to hear it from my own mouth. Later that afternoon, I met with Dr. Hall. "I don't know how to explain it," I said. "I just feel like I've arrived somewhere." "Maybe you have," she smiled. "Maybe you're finally home." Those words stayed with me. That evening, I sat down at my desk and pulled out my journal, the one that held years of ache, of questions, of things I never dared say aloud. And I wrote, "I am not waiting anymore. I am not a tragedy. I am not a secret. I am Eleanor Grace Mitchell, and I am enough." It took me 3 decades to write that sentence. And when I did, I cried. Not the trembling, panicked tears of my youth, but the kind that cleanse, that baptize, that break open the soil so something new can grow. I started saying yes more often. Yes to dinner invites. Yes to weekend trips. Yes to dancing in the kitchen when my favorite song came on. yes to breathing without guilt, and eventually yes to love. His name was Michael. We met through a community writing workshop. He was kind, quiet, the type who listened more than he spoke. He never asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. He respected silences, honored my boundaries, brought me wildflowers just because they reminded him of light. I told him my story early on. He held my hand the whole time. When I finished, I waited for judgment, for pity, for distance. Instead, he said, "Thank you for trusting me. You are the bravest woman I know." And I believed him, because by then I had already begun to believe it myself. We didn't rush. We dated for 2 years, took long walks, cooked together, read to each other at night. He told me once, "You taught me that survival is holy, that wounds don't make you weak. They prove you fought." We married in a small ceremony in the backyard of the Thompsons' house. Georgia was there, sitting in a wheelchair now, but smiling so wide it reached her eyes. Mama wasn't. She had passed a year earlier. I found her final letter in my mailbox the week before the wedding. It said, "I never had your courage, Eleanor, but I always had your strength. I carried it, even when I couldn't name it. You saved me more than once, just by surviving." I held that letter in my hand as I walked down the aisle. Hope didn't come to the wedding. I didn't expect her to, but I left a seat empty with a small card that read, "For the love I gave away and the love I carry still." During our vows, Michael said, "I don't promise to fix you. I promise to stand beside you while you grow." And I whispered back, "I am not broken, just blooming." We spent our honeymoon in a quiet cabin near the mountains. No cell service, no emails, just stars and stories. And one night, under a sky so clear it felt like the universe was listening, I told Michael, I used to think my story would end in silence. And now, I think it's just beginning. I used to wonder what legacy meant. When I was younger, I thought it was something you left behind in money or names carved on plaques. Something loud, something people remembered you for. But now, in the stillness of my 70s, I've come to understand. Legacy is not what you leave behind. It's what you live. It's in the lives you touch without even knowing, the silences you break so someone else can speak, the truth you dare to tell even when your voice shakes. My name is Eleanor Grace Mitchell. I am 74 years old, and I am not ashamed of my story anymore. I share it not to be pitied, but to prove that healing is possible, that surviving is not the end, it's the beginning of becoming someone who lives fully, fiercely, and without apology. I still have that journal, the one with the letter to Hope. Sometimes I reread it. I wonder if she ever felt me thinking of her. If, during a hard moment, she looked out a window and felt, somehow, that someone out there loved her without needing to be known. I hope so. I hope she found peace, and that her life is full of laughter and music and mornings that begin with light. Because no matter how far apart we are, I carry her in every good thing I do. I never became rich. I never became famous. But I became free. And that's a kind of wealth no one can steal. I still volunteer, still speak at shelters, still sit with girls who tremble as they say the words they were never allowed to say. And I tell them, you are not dirty. You are not ruined. You are not the sins someone else committed. One girl, not long ago, clutched my hand after a group meeting and whispered, "Thank you for being brave first. It made it easier for me." That's legacy. A ripple, a breath, a light passed forward. Michael, and I still take walks every evening. He holds my hand like it's something sacred. We've grown older, softer, but love, real love, doesn't wrinkle. It deepens. And on my birthday this year, he gave me a small pendant. Inside, engraved were the words, "Enough. Always." I wear it close to my heart, not because I need to remember, but because I want to never forget. The little girl who once hid behind silence now stands on stages. The young woman who once whispered her pain now writes books. The mother who once gave her child away now mothers the world with open hands. I am not perfect. I still have bad days. Still cry sometimes when no one is watching. Still ache when certain songs play. But I don't apologize for it, because scars are proof that I stayed, that I chose to keep going. And if you're listening now, still unsure, still hurting, still wondering if there's a way forward, let me be proof. You are not your trauma. You are your resilience. You are your breath. You are the quiet mornings you survived, the nights you didn't give up, the truth you're still learning to speak. Your legacy isn't what you leave behind someday. It's what you do today. It's in the choice to be kind to yourself, to tell your story, to love again, to rise. If this story has reached you, if Eleanor's voice felt like a mirror to your own, then let this be the moment you choose to keep walking. Not for anyone else. For you. If you've stayed with me until the end, comment, "I believe in healing," to show others they are not alone. Like this video to spread this message to someone who's still silent. Subscribe to our channel to join a growing circle of survivors who now call themselves warriors. Because you're not broken. You're blooming. Because you're not too late. You're right on time. Because you matter. Right here. Right now. And maybe that's the only legacy we ever needed to leave.